In 1990, a professor of philosophy, Jeffrey Riemann, wrote the book The Rich Gets Richer and the Poor Gets Prison. In Nigerian street lingo, there's a particular chat line that is so popular. They say, "This life, no balance." And they deploy that kind of statement when somebody feels so disadvantaged in the business of life, especially if you compare yourself with another individual who may have done something worse or may not have built any serious moral capital. And yet the events in life would favor that individual and disfavor you. So they say, well, the life, no balance. Take, for instance, in criminal law, where the highest form of punishment for breaking and entering somebody's dwelling in some common law jurisdictions is actually life imprisonment. Now, compare that with a politician who may have stolen or embezzled billions in taxpayer money. Now, if he gets a good lawyer, the law would well crown him such that he's freed eventually. The same law, the same judges. This life, no balance at all. Now, on this week's installment of Teachers of the Issues, we're talking about the raging issue in Ghana at the moment regarding a particular and popular Reverend Doctor who has been jailed for 15 years for defrauding by false pretenses and also charlatanic advertisement. You know who I'm talking about. We're talking about the Reverend Doctor Agradaa. So the topic for this week is Reverend Doctor Evangelist Agradaa and the law of Mr. Bumble. Now, we know this particular statement. The law is the law. You know who said that, right? Those words were uttered by Auntie Araba. So the Chief Justice, who is now suspended and is going through some kind of ordeal at the moment, right? So she did a press conference recently, and she left things out. So she's made that statement. Now, you also know this particular statement. The law is an ass. It's an idiot. That was said by Mr. Bumble in Oliver Twist by Chaucer. Now, people mistake that for Shakespeare, but it wasn't Shakespeare who said that. That was said by Mr. Bumble in Oliver Twist. Now, so last week, Ghanaians were served both versions of the law, Mr. Bumble's law and the law being a law by Auntie Araba. We were served both versions when the law court eventually, after a long period of trial since 2022, sentenced Reverend Evangelist Agradaa to some 15 years imprisonment for those crimes I mentioned. And so there's been a lot of commentary as we do best in Ghana. People giving their own versions of what should have happened. Some say, well, perhaps it was too much sentence. Maybe 15 years is too much. Could have done some 5 or 3 years, just as a deterrent. Also just so that people like that would take caution. But others who have also felt the brunt of Mrs. Agrada's misdeeds are saying, well, 15 years is actually too small. Give her 30 years. She's duped a lot of people, rendered people homeless. So give her more years than that. So, but her lawyer has said something that is quite instructive. That, well, Agrada's punishment is not because of what she did, but it's because of who she is on social media. You know, her excesses and all that. So we all used to that. Now, who is Agradaa really? When her husband, Prophet Asiama, when she's preaching, that husband is behind her, saying, lauding her, right? I mean, encouraging her, saying a lot of things. Sometimes she says, well, woman power, woman trump. When he says those things, he's unwittingly giving us an explanation of the character that is Agradaa. Now, what are her early days? Well, we understand that in her very early days in Accra, she shared a kiosk with her husband, somewhere in Accra, and she sold second-hand clothing at the popular place, Cantonment and all that. So she's had her own portion of the hard issues of life, right? So she's been through things, and we have some unconfirmed accounts that, well, in the course of doing all that, somebody duped her, and she decided to also get into the business of duping, really. So, but I mean, these are unconfirmed, right? So we also know that somebody also said, well, she ever visited a fetish priestess, and she saw how they do it and decided, well, this is something I can do. So, but these are unconfirmed. But what we do know is that, well, she was once a priestess that people would consult. We know the popular Sika Gari situation and all that. The people would consult her, and she would do some incantation, and she's actually been to the USA, right, to perform for some kind of documentary recording. Okay, so she isn't your small fry. She isn't your average Joe. This is a whole commodity we're talking about here, Agradaa, right? So Agrada's life is a tapestry of conundrums, enterprise, industry, and also perhaps we could add a word, excesses, right? And so there are many things to a character that it will take a whole lots of years to kind of unravel. So if you look at a character like that who started very small, nobody really became a fetish priestess, eventually owned her own television station, Thunder Television, through all that Sikagari business, eventually transmogrified overnight into a reverend minister, bought a church, and now pastors a church, and has a following, right? It is not your average story, right? And somebody said this will make a fine Hollywood movie where we would have somebody like Mama Brown playing Agradaa, Van Vicker playing, say, Evangelist Asema. I think they look alike, he's fair like him. We would have Bigger Quates, Agrada's assistant, playing the same role in there. And we will have maybe Lewin playing God, right, to judge what's happening, or playing the judge, maybe. So this is the kind of character we're talking about. She's not your usual quantity, right? But the law is also interested in who you are not, okay? So what is Agradaa and what is she not, right? So let's understand that we are not all equal before the law. When we say we are equal before the law, well, you are only equal because that's what the books would tell you. But the law is not for all of us. We are not equal before the law at all. And so if you compare, some people have said, well, what Agradaa has done is something we hear all the time. Pastors, Flamboyant pastors on television, they do all these things, right? And there's a popular pastor in Accra. There's a video of him going around and calling for $1,000 donations, and nobody was getting up. And he kept saying off because to pay, so people, nobody was getting up. And if you go to church, especially in charismatic churches, you would find these things. Who wants to bring $1,000 for a certain blessing? These are things that we hear about. Even if you go to for popular events like Greater Works, right? There's usually Bishop Ashimolowo would call, for some kind of serious spiritual blessing. If someone will bring in 5,000, and we see people trooping in. All right, so people are saying, well, these things are not new. Bring money and you will get some more of it. It's a particular activity that happens in church all the time. But perhaps the issue with Agradaa is that she went a bit too far, right? Said she would double the money. So, and that gets into the issue of Bank of Ghana situation, because if you want to double money, then we are quietly exiting the area of faith into legal tender matter. So how do you double somebody else's money? Okay. And so now the conviction that has been given onto her, if she actually wants to plead, perhaps she could plead for a reduction of the sentence. That's you contesting the sentence. But if you want to plead for the conviction to say, well, it never happened, then that perhaps wouldn't work. So in criminal law, what we do know is the act, all right, that is the actus reus, the criminal act itself, and then also the mens rea. Okay, so that is a criminal mind. So it's when we have a coincidence, when we can draw a balance, the prosecution can draw a balance between the actus reus and mens rea. That is where we have a conviction. Okay, and so the criminal mind, at the time that Agradaa was calling for people to bring in money and they would be doubled, what was going through her mind? Was it a criminal mind that was what was happening? Okay, so if you compare that with a pastor in a certain church who is also saying, bring this money donation and God will bless you, he hasn't made a very, very serious commitment there. So there's a little window there that we can always assist. But that it's a whole grand scheme, and they're all doing the same thing, right? But perhaps we are in an era of scapegoatism, and Agradaa has just been scapegoated to serve as a deterrent to other people, those selling anointed oil, anointed water, stickers and all those things. Perhaps they will sit up and know that, well, that's going to happen. So Agradaa is also not the kind of individual that you expect to get a fantastic sermon from. When she's preaching in her church, it's interesting though. I mean, sometimes it serves as comic fodder for all of us. So you wouldn't get any great homiletics. That is the art of preaching. There is nothing like hermeneutics. That is the interpretation of scripture. You won't get that from her. And there's nothing like apologetics. That is the argument, the biblical argument that you use to bring examples from the world and all that, to preach as part of the homiletics. So this is not what you get from Agradaa. Well, if you want to get that, then you go to Dr. Mesa Orabe. If you want to get that, you go to Sabkran Chakra, you go to the Papa himself, the Archbishop, right? If you want to get fantastic preaching. But hers is quite clear, right? I mean, she's more or less, doing a lot of buffoon activities, and we laugh about it, and that's what it's been like. So she has following, and you want to ask, what are the kind of people who follow this individual? We will get to that. So there's a particular phrase that we are all used to. If you especially go to the charismatic churches, give, and it will be given back to you. Press down, shaken together, run over, what men give unto your bosom. Who doesn't know the scripture? Luke 6:38, that's where it is. People can quote it by heart. Right? There's another scripture in Malachi 3:10 that, bring in your tithe, okay, and the Lord will rebuke the devourer for your sake. We know that. So people will say, well, your life will be tight until you tithe, right? And there's also first fruit. So from the beginning of the year, your first salary, so you send all of that to church. Your first salary from the year, you give all that to church and expect that God will work out something for you. So that's in addition to your monthly tithe, right? So every month, there's a tenth of your money, of your salary, will go into tithing, of course. But see, the issue of tithing is a whole controversial area, and it's interesting that those who do not pay are those who do the advocacy, and they do it, at the octave, right? Those who pay are quietly happy paying, but those who wouldn't pay are those who do the advocacy on behalf of those who are paying. So it's a very interesting dynamic there, right? But it's a matter of faith, right? If you don't believe it, don't do it. If you do it, those who do it say, well, it's been working for them. If you don't do it, if you don't believe in it, then don't pay, all right? So, but with this whole thing, tithing and bringing money in church and all that, it's been a controversial area of concern. Okay, so in recent times, we've had this rather fantastic Nigerian preacher, Dr. Agradaa, and he's been going on, with fantastic, expositions of the gospel of prosperity. All right, that when we do that, we present God as a transactional God who will not give you anything until you give me something. So it's a whole transaction. Give me that, and I'll give you that. But God is a father who loves and gives, not because we've given, but because he's father and kind enough to give. I mean, that is what that has been the thesis of Bishop Dr. Agradaa, and he does a fantastic job with that, right? But again, it's a faith matter. It's either you believe in it and you want to just do it and help out your church, but he's saying that he's not against you giving out in church, but don't pin God to that, right? That until I give to God, he will not bless me. So he says, well, God is not that kind of individual. He will bless you anyway, and it's not because you're giving that he bless you. But we'll go into that. Now, those who have been following this Agradaa matter may have also encountered a very disturbing video, and it's actually something on Twitter by a former British ambassador to Ghana, John Benjamin. He's put out something very, very concerning. It's so controversial. We can't mention the subject of his Twitter post because this is about a very important member of the clergy in Ghana, and he's suggesting that, well, if Agradaa was going to jail, it should have been that particular pastor driving Agradaa to jail because he belongs in jail anyway. Okay, but we can't mention that person's name. But look, that particular pastor, I'm thinking that his handlers should be very concerned with what things like this mean for the reputation of the church. It's a huge reputational damage in there, right? And it's not just, and John Benjamin is in the first. Most people would have said these things about that particular man of God, and I think his handlers should pay attention. They shouldn't dismiss these things because they don't say that about other big pastors, but that particular pastor, people show him so much disrespect, even though he's such a great individual. I like him, but his handlers should really be sitting down with a good PR person to see how they can address some of these things, because it doesn't do your image any good if everybody around you, especially the Ghanaian intelligentsia and all that, if they think of you in a particular light, and it's very opposite to the kind of job you're doing, as a member of the clergy, it's concerning. And I am actually hoping that his handlers would take a closer look. Recently, the former BA chairman for the MPP, Bronya, they call him, he came out with something very scathing about him. It's not great. The chap in America, Kevin Taylor, has said some so damaging things about this particular man of God. And I'm particularly, scandalized, right, when I hear some of the things they're saying. I don't think they should get close to that in talking about a man of God. So we should get to look at all these things. And perhaps also because the men of God in the charismatic stream, they haven't done a particularly fantastic job when it comes to display of opulence and ostentation and all that, right? Recently, I heard one of them, maybe the finest that we know, he was comparing himself with, say, a footballer, say Ronaldo or say Messi, and saying that, well, people castigate men of God when they see that they have something big, when they have money, when they live in a good place, when they have a good car. But how about a footballer like Messi or Ronaldo, who is paid several thousands, 30,000, whatever, in a week? Why are you not talking about that kind of person? But it's not the same thing. Messi and Ronaldo, they are not talking about faith. But when you stand in the pulpit, okay, and you make certain proclamations that if somebody delivers, say, $1,000 or $5,000, because of that particular money they've given, there'll be some blessing. It's a bit, the gospel of prosperity, is a very controversial area. So some of us, we are very constrained. We can't say too much about it because of our background. Okay. But I'm thinking that as we go along, the charismatic faith, those in charge of it, those who are expected in that faith should take some look, at these things. We've seen Reverend Dr. Otabel recently doing some great teachings about the fact that if the people in the faith do not sit up and stop certain things, we will self-destruct. He sees an imminent collapse of the whole charismatic stream if these excesses fester, are meant to prosper. Let me just use religious word, right? If these excesses of certain men of God, those additional fake prophecies, those doing some dodgy stuff, if these things prosper, it might spread a doom for the whole charismatic community. So the issue of opulence and ostentation. Look, when people see a man of God indulging in certain, or perhaps being so opulent, it doesn't sit well with anybody, right? Or with many people. And so the thinking is that if you're a man of God, perhaps there's a way to, you could still be rich, but there's a way to behave if you are rich if you're a man of God, right? I don't think people are suggesting that in the days of John the Baptist, where he was eating locusts and lizards and Annie, that is how a man of God should do. No, things have changed. Things have turned out in a certain way. But the calling should tame you in certain areas. That has been people's thinking. Now, so let's get to the issue of Agrada's sermon again. Now, what does a typical sermon of Agradaa look like? Right? So it's replete with invectives and then profanity, really. She doesn't really say much. She doesn't know these popular scriptures that people will use. Luke 6:38, she's never quoted it to get people to come forward for money. She doesn't know anything about Malachi 3:10. So she does what she knows, right? So if you listen to her sermon, it's so funny. Whatever she says, the husband will cheer her on and do certain things behind her, and a woman per woman trump and all that. And it's a whole comic activity that sometimes is great. But it's one thing that she did recently that I loved. In a certain sermon recently, she called out some people to come and take money, right? So she called out people in the church, and she shared money to them on television, live television. She shared money. Some of her elders shared money. Some of the church members, she paid them, come and take money. She did that to them. Look, I was seated at the ICGC, Christ Temple Church, where Dr. Otabel pastors. I was right there. When after people had given offering, Dr. Otabel called out those who were not able to give because they don't have money to give. I was right there in the church at Tabosoka, right? And he called out that if you were here and during the offering you couldn't give anything because you are poor genuinely, you couldn't give. Now, this is a chance for you. Come and dip your hands into the money people have given and pick some. And he warned that, well, but don't pick too much so that your neighbor could also get something. So people lined up, picked, whatever they could get hands on from the offering that people had given, and they picked what they could from the offering bowl. I was right there, sorry. And I think that was the most fantastic showing of the gospel that I thought Dr. Tobias, and I've written about this in some of mine. It was great, right? And if we saw more of these things, instead of pastors always taking, if they give back like this, it would be great. But look, pastors give back too, but sometimes it doesn't show. Reverend Dr. Odro recently said that, well, there are times he would, in a particular day, dispatch 300,000 Ghana cedis to people. Right? Some people paying rent, some hospitals. So they do these things. Some even give out their cars and all that. Okay. But people don't talk about it. But once they receive, then there's a problem. So there's a balancing that we should do. But of course, it goes back to the life not balancing. So maybe life, once you get into the clergy, life wouldn't balance for you. And it's something you must accept. Right? You are a clergyman. So people talk about you and all that. But that's your cross. You chose that. And so you got to deal with it. So we've always known Reverend Dr. Odro's, Reverend Dr. Agrada's excesses. We've been used to it. We've all enjoyed her at one point or the other. And I'm even sure these big bishops, they all listen to her too. I mean, they know who she is. They would have come across her one or twice and say, well, look at somebody making a real joke of the gospel. We all know who she is. And we've more or less, being with her, just literally, soaked in her excesses, and nobody has really spoken much about her, except a few court cases here and there. But generally, you would expect somebody, people like the Christian Council of Ghana, to issue a strong statement, something like, so that we know that, well, they are not happy with what such a character is doing. But you normally wouldn't hear anything like that, anything from people, that kind of body, to sanitize the situation. I hear if you go to Rwanda, people like that maybe couldn't even be preaching. They can't own a church because there are strict procedures in there. You must have a degree in theology or something like that to be a pastor. So, and that's one thing that Dr. Tobe has been also talking about, that people who present themselves as a clergy individual, you must have some qualification too. You can't just show up and say, God has called me. Who was there when they called you, right? So it's a process, but we'd expect the Christian Council of Ghana to have each or the charismatic movement, these big people, should have said something, okay? But we all watched her, enjoyed her social media buffoonery, and until now we have this on our crisis. Look, if you watch a particular Agradaa sermon, it's interesting. There was one that she actually said something that was funny, that when Jesus walked on water, after walking on water, Jesus said, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That's what she said Jesus said, right? This is in a sermon. And her congregation cheered to that kind of hopper. They cheered her, suggesting that they also didn't know that she was actually wrong in there, right? So, so that tells you the caliber of individual who actually preaches to people. Eli, Eli, labasa, and she couldn't even mention the labasa batani properly. Okay, so that is the character, So it's so comic relief, and is before I enjoyed her, perhaps until recently. So, and if she's an outlier, I think we have a few outliers too. So we've caricatured her as maybe an outlier of the gospel and a buffoon, perhaps. But we have other buffoons too. People doing a lot of foolish things in the name of God. A lot of foolish things. Recently, I had a case on one of these social media marriage counselors. I think is it Adazwa or yeah, I think that's Adazwa. That's what her name is. That somebody went to a man of God. She wants to have children, and things are difficult, and she wants to save her marriage by having a baby. So she went to a man of God to pray or to do something about the situation. And the man of God said, well, the reason why you're not conceiving is that your husband has a girlfriend. So, and he sleeps with a girlfriend in a particular way. So if you want to have children, I have to sleep with you in that same way that your husband sleeps with his girlfriend. And once I do that, you will begin to get pregnant. So the lady actually also, went in there and started having sex in a particular funny way with this particular man of God, hoping that, through that, she would get pregnant. So there are people doing foolish things, very, very foolish things in the name of the gospel. And we are hoping that one of these days, the law of the hand of the law would come very, very strong on people like that, and so that we see what's happening. So what is our verdict for this week? Well, our verdict is that the very first time the Bible used the three words man of God, the very first time the Bible used that was in Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 1. That is the first time that the words man of God was used in the Bible. And it was used for Moses. So before we call anybody man of God, perhaps maybe we should be looking at what Moses was doing at the time that they called him man of God. All right, and compare that with that person's life, whether what they are doing is what Moses was doing too at the time. So it's not a title that we should use. We should deploy loosely at all for anybody. Man of God, it means a lot of things. Okay, it means you're an example. It means you are shepherding people. You can't say, look, I can get it wrong and come back and plead it. No, people are looking up to you. Okay, it's a very big responsibility, and I'm wondering whether they actually realize how big that is. But you see, for all her faults, Reverend Evangelist Agradaa has never claimed anywhere or even pretended that she hears from God. She's never said that anywhere in her sermons. She's never pretended to use her pulpit or her church as a healing altar where people will come and he would pray, and she would pray and heal anybody. All right, she's never given out any serious prophecy as people give, elsewhere, and it doesn't come true and nobody bothers them again. She's never done that. Okay, so there's somebody who has gone about her business, in a funny, sometimes a few excesses, but in just a funny way. Indeed, in one of her sermons, she claimed that she and her husband, Bishop Esiama, are criminals. And she said criminals, right? So that's a version of saying criminals. So I and my husband, we are criminals. Okay, that was maybe just for comic reasons, which eventually has exposed her as actually being a criminal too, right? But the real criminals, I think, are those who use their big pulpits because of some goodwill they have. They have some goodwill and credibility, with us. So they will use their huge pulpits to court the attention of the political class. They are the criminals that we know, because eventually they will go to the other person and pretend they are doing the national assignment. But you can see that there's a particular strategy, so they call the attention of the political class. They are the criminals I'm thinking about. The real criminals are those who dish out prophecies that they don't believe in. They call themselves men of faith. So every election they bring out funny prophecies about who will win the election. They pronounce some people dead before they even win the election. A lot of funny stuff. These are the criminals that you should target. Because how do you say a certain vice president will die after the election, and you are still working free, and Agradaa is in prison? Okay, so you are a criminal because you're making a fake prophecy. Do you know what it means to say a vice president will die? Look at the following that the woman has. Okay, and the member of our political class, you say these things about her, and then we let you go because, well, you can just hide in the corner of faith and say, well, I hear from God, and God did something else. Look, so these are the criminals that we should be talking about. There are people who are living very, very large. Okay, Agradaa isn't living that large. He has a few things, and she doesn't even. The criminals that we're not talking about are those who are living extremely large. Okay, of people who have literally commoditized the gospel of Jesus Christ. They are those that the law should be targeting. Okay, so we're hoping that people are praying and beseeching the president to do something about the conviction of Agradaa, and say, well, but as we said earlier, the president can perhaps intervene in the sentencing, that the number of years perhaps, or a general pardon per se, a pardon that she go home, but the conviction will still remain. Okay, she's been convicted, She might serve a few years, 15. It's not actually, but I think if you break it down, maybe 5 or a couple of years in prison, and then she would come back. And but once she comes back, let's hope that she wouldn't do something else in the name of another, in the guise of faith. If so that would send us all right back. So this has been this installment of your favorite program, Tissue of the Issues. So today we've spoken about Reverend Dr. Evangelist Agradaa, and perhaps the thesis right there is that Mr. Bumble tells us that the law is an ass, it's an idiot. And then Auntie Rabba has told us that the law is what it is. It is the law. You can't do anything about it. And philosopher, Professor Jeffrey Riemann has told us that the law is also the law, but in this world, all we do know is that the law will favor those who are rich, so the rich gets richer and the poor gets prison. This is Tissue of the Issues. We'll come your way again next week, but before you do go, please subscribe to this channel. Thank you very, very much. My name again is Benjamin Quisiteria. Thank you.